never thought that I would be making this type of video, really calling out and criticizing my own industry that I work in. And I'm not talking about content creation, I'm talking about the acting industry that I've been a member of since I was a teenager. So, just to clarify something, a little while ago, the Supreme Court ruled that women are biological women. I mean, who would have thought that? They were just addressing the definition of the Equality Act. Now, the video that I've got for you today is going to tie into the other two videos that I've got for you for this week. So, what happened was after this Supreme Court ruling, the Actors Union that I am a member of and have been a member of for a long time released a statement. Now, originally, I wouldn't have covered this statement ordinarily, but now we're going to have to, because this statement then resulted in an open letter from the writers and then an open letter to film and television industry professionals and cultural bodies, which was signed by over 1,000 people in the industry: actors, entertainers, writers, casting agents, all of those people. So, without further ado, hello and welcome back to Chat About It, Don't Chat About It with me, Rachel, the Queen of the Woke, as crowned by one of my haters. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel, switch on the notification bell so that you know I am releasing another video. Please do keep it kind and respectful in the comments. Healthy debate is always the way to go. Thank you to everyone who subscribed. I could not run this channel without you. I think I've just said that. Did I just repeat myself? Anyway, moving on. Let's have a look at the statement from Equity. So on the Actors Union website, you can actually go and find this should you wish to do so. I'm not going to be linking everything below for you today. Because I just do not want to draw any attention to it in that respect. So that's my choice. I've also not signed anything that is going against my own morals. I will not do that. So this is the statement that Equity released. Equity is deeply concerned by the Supreme Court's ruling today that trans women are not women. Well, they're not. They're biological men. When it comes to the Equality Act, responding to the judgment, Equity calls for unions to stand in solidarity with those affected by the judgment and to defend trans women and men in the workplace of all walks of life. So I already have issue with that. So forget biological women, forget biological man. You should be focusing on absolutely everyone here in this statement, but you just want to focus on trans women and trans men. Now, that's up to them. However, that's a little bit, well, anyway, carrying on. Commenting on the judgment, Equity General Secretary Paul W. Fleming said, Equity will, and every trades union should, well, they don't have to, stand in solidarity with those affected by the judgment, but also defend them in their workplaces as they seek work and as they live full lives visibly in our society. The rights of workers won through a united movement changing social structures to the interests of our class. Right, so a workers' union cannot defend people living in society. If we're just getting on with our everyday lives, you can't defend us with that. Now, I don't have an issue with what they're saying with things about work and things like that. They're absolutely entitled to work so long as it is legal. But whilst you can say that you stand in solidarity with them, you seem to be forgetting about the women who may really feel the need that they should have the access to those spaces that they really want, those single-sex spaces, but you're not. You're just disregarding that fact. You should be supporting that as well, but I don't see that. I'm seeing a one-sided stance, and then you criticize them again. While the victors pop champagne bottles outside the court, our trans members' safety and dignity at work is now at yet a greater risk. But how is it at a greater risk? You've not told us that, but yet, like I just said, us women, we may want our safe spaces whilst we are at work, yet you're just focusing on the one group here. So that's not very equal. It's not very equity. It's not very fair, is it? We will be urgently regrouping to ensure we defend and advocate for trans artists and others affected from organising for Pride as protests, defending drag artists from the far right, lovely, fighting for incidental casting, and protecting their dignity at work. The Supreme Court ruled that trans women and trans men will still have their rights and they were not allowed to be discriminated against, okay? But this just seems to have gone over people's heads. I don't know why. People seem to think that the law has changed. It has not. It's only been clarified. Our industrial work will always protect all those with protected characteristics, whether the law cares to or not. Okay, what about women? You didn't mention women at all in this statement. Didn't mention the biological men at all in this statement. Trans men are men. No, they're not. They are biological women. Trans women are women. No, they're not. They're biological men. To all people, equity. Listen, I acknowledge, and I have done, and I still will, gender dysphoria is a very real thing. People do whatever it is that they need to do in order to alleviate that, okay? I will still stand by that to this day. I haven't changed my stance on that. But it should not be, we should not be disregarded. Those who acknowledge their biological sex should not be disregarded. It's just, oh my goodness, I cannot believe this is going on in my industry. It's such a mess right now. And then the UK writers responded with this. This was in response to what Equity had written. An open letter of solidarity with the trans community from Writers UK. The UK Supreme Court ruling of 16th April 2025 was the result of a coordinated and privately funded attack on the human rights. No, it wasn't focusing on human rights and dignity of trans and non-binary people in the UK. Their rights are still protected. It did not change their human rights. Okay, just to be clear on that, it was confirming a definition and what the government meant at the time when they wrote that Equality Act. We call upon our industry to meet this moment with bravery and solidarity. As actors, as writers, the undersigned stand in solidarity with the trans community. The signatories of this letter attest to the fact that writers with a bi-essentialist view of womanhood and a binary view of sex and gender are in the minority. We call on our industries, theatre, TV, film, radio, literature, and journalism to do the same. As outlined by the Good Law Project, this Supreme Court hearing took place on a shaky legal ground and without the involvement of any trans voices. They also noted that had any trans organisations been involved, they would likely have been faced with harassment and threats. Right. There's no evidence that that would have happened, really. That's just predicting unnecessarily. The UK has become an increasingly hostile place for trans and non-binary people, with a 186% increase in hate crimes against trans people in the last 5 years. We are deeply concerned that this ruling will embolden a bigoted but powerful minority in their harassment of trans and non-binary people and attempts to hound gender non-conforming people out of public spaces. This will have consequences not just for trans people, but for anyone who deviates from gender norms, making society less safe for everyone. Hey, I'm all about them having their own spaces, okay, that women have no access to, just to be clear. I think that should be a thing. I don't see why that should be a problem, to be honest. If the government can fund all these things abroad, I'm sure they can fund that. This Supreme Court ruling contributes to the erosion of the rights of marginalised LGBTQ+ communities globally. This has been seen recently in Uganda, Hungary, and the US, to name only a few examples. Transparency International UK, which aims to fight corruption worldwide, warned 2 months ago about the impact of private donors' influence in British politics. Hasn't that always been the case? I just assumed that that was the case, with the US showing what could happen here if money in politics is left unchecked. The recent nomination list for the Olivier Awards, the Booker Prize, and the T.S. Eliot Prize demonstrate the power of stories that challenge bigotry and intolerance, with LGBTQ+ writers and artists making viral contributions to the broad landscape of arts and culture, public discourse, and the economy. Cultural conversations are hugely important to how people are perceived and treated in society, and it is paramount that trans visibility, representation, and protection be ongoing and sustained commitment for all arts organisations going forward, with quantifiable efforts to promote trans voices and stories. We applaud Equity's swift and emphatic response to the ruling and the specificality of their next steps of active support for the trans and non-binary members, and we call upon others to join them. We urge other unions, theatres, agencies, publishers, and news outlets to sign this letter and make their own statement of how they will actively support their trans and non-binary staff, contractors, and service users. And right at the top of this 2,000+ name signed letter is Russell T. Davies. I do not know if he composed this letter. I don't know who wrote it, but he's right there at the top. Yeah. And, well, this letter then resulted in a prompt from this letter, and this letter has caused some very interesting reactions, one that we'll cover tomorrow and one that we will cover on Wednesday, okay? So, I will not be signing this letter. It goes against my morals, and to be quite frank, I think if something should happen, these people are going to have to explain all of this away somehow, if something really bad happens. And it won't necessarily happen now, but it could happen like 5 or 6 years in the future. Anyway, an open letter to film and television industry professionals and cultural bodies. We, the undersigned film and television professionals, stand in solidarity with trans, non-binary, and intersex communities. I thought a lot of people who were intersex still had a biology, who have been impacted by the Supreme Court ruling on April 17th. We wish to add our voices to the 2,000+ signatories of the open letter from UK writers to the trans community published last week, and call upon members of our industry and cultural bodies to join us. How about now? I'm not going to do that. Okay? I'm just not. The Supreme Court ruling that under the Equality Act, woman is defined by biological sex, states that the concept of sex is binary, a person is either a woman or a man. We believe the ruling undermines the lived reality and threatens the safety of trans, non-binary and intersex people living in the UK. But how does it do that? How does it do that? Can you answer that? It's all very well you saying that, but you need to back it up when you say that. The Equalities and Human Rights Commission interim update on the ruling states that trans women are not permitted to access women's facilities and trans men are not permitted to access men's facilities, while further suggesting that trans people may also be excluded from using facilities that correspond to their biological sex. We believe this guidance exposes trans people to embarrassment and harassment and excludes them from participation in public life. Well, does it though? I mean, they can still get married, they can still have relationships, they can still work. We stand with the many women, including Labour MP Kate Osborne and Green Party co-leader Carla Denyer, who have condemned both the ruling and the EHRC guidance. We applaud them for highlighting the negative consequences that both will have for all women and the harm that trans and gender non-conforming people face as a result. You see, now this is an issue that I also have. You have to set the descriptors here. So you say women, so I'm guessing you mean biological women, but then you have to have the word trans to show that there is a difference. If they were real women, then what is the point of that descriptor? But you have to be clear in this open letter that they are trans. So you're acknowledging that their biology is that of a biological man by putting the trans identifier on it. So I find that very interesting, that the progressive left roll with this and have to put the identifiers on. It's very interesting. The UK film and television industry is at the forefront of cultural change. In recent years, we have come together in response to the Me Too and Black Lives Matter movements to reflect upon our own work practices and uplift a broad spectrum of voices in our society. We must now urgently work to ensure that our trans, non-binary and intersex colleagues— why are you lumping intersex in with trans and non-binary? I don't speak for intersex people. Obviously, I speak on behalf of biological women who want access to their spaces. But why are you lumping in intersex? Do you speak for them? Interesting. Collaborators and audiences are protected from discrimination and harassment in all areas of the industry, whether on set, in a production office, or at the cinema. Right, the Supreme Court has already said that they're not allowed to be discriminated against. The ruling is to define and make sure that we know what the definition truly was when it was written. Oh my goodness. And, well, let's continue. We applaud Equity's response to the Supreme Court ruling and commitment to its trans members, and we call upon our cultural institutions, including BEC2. I don't know if BEC2 have said anything yet. BAFTA, BFI, Directors UK, Picture House, BBC, Writers Guild, and Channel 4 to join us in condemning the Supreme Court ruling by using their public platforms to make meaningful commitments to protecting trans, non-binary and intersex members, talent and staff from discrimination within their respective organisations. Okay, but what about the women who want access to their own spaces and have that right to have their own safe spaces according to their biological sex? Again, at total disregard, and this is a problem that we quite often see from the progressive left, unfortunately. I'm a member of this industry, but I will never ever conform to this. And so if that means that I am cancelled, then whatever. If I don't work in the industry again, fine, so be it. At least I stand with my morals. I've not got all the list of names here on the screen. There's just way too many. But I do have access to all of them. I have seen every single name on this list. There are celebrities on this list. There are people that I know on this list. And if you're wondering how I know that that is the someone that I know, it's because you cannot have the same name as someone else if you are on Equity or Spotlight or both. You have to have your own unique name. And then there's also casting agents that I also know, so casting directors and agencies that I am very well aware of. So I'll just give you a few examples. So Nicola Coughlan is on there, Emma Watson, Eddie Redmayne, Emma Darcy, Kit Connor, Papasiadu. We'll get to that later on in the week. And then there's Saran Jones, who was in one of the Doctor Who stories, Matt Smith one. I think she played the TARDIS. I can't remember the name of the character. It feels like a long time ago. There's Russell Tovey, who's coming up in the war between the land and the sea, Ncuti Gatwa. And keep going down, see if there's any more names that I know here. Katie Leung, who was in the Harry Potter franchise as Cho Chang, if I remember correctly. Yeah, so we've got a massive list of names right here. Now, there's one thing that I will say that I think is a huge, huge risk for some of these people. Some of these people, where they have signed up, right, they have signed with their business names. That is such a risky move, okay? Because I hate cancel culture, all right? I hate cancel culture of the left, the progressive left, and the right, okay? I would be very concerned about anyone who is putting their business on this list. First of all, if you put your business to this list, you're probably making it sound like you are speaking on behalf of that business. And we have seen what happens when businesses that don't have any association necessarily with any activist cause suddenly employ people or give people promotions that are tied to activist causes. I'm thinking Bud Light, Dylan Mulvaney, it tanked their business and it's taking them a very long time to recover. So, you know, that's concerning. But also, what is concerning about this list and these 1,483 signatures on this list is if something happens further down the line in the industry and say the spaces and the law was disregarded, all of these people will have their name tied to that because they signed this letter. Now, they can sign this letter. That's entirely up to them. I wouldn't recommend putting their businesses on it, but they can sign it. It's entirely up to them. But it is an awful big risk to do something like that. And I also think that there is a possibility that some of these names that are on this list may be there out of the fear of being cancelled. And that is also a worry. However, I'm going to stand by my morals. I will not sign that list. So that will hopefully lead us into the next two videos on Tuesday and Wednesday, give you a bit of context. But yeah, I cannot believe that I had to go into that amount of welly and oomph and almost anger from me, I guess you could say, for this particular video and my industry. Oh well, let me know what you think. Chat about it, don't shout about it. Thank you very much for watching. Please keep it respectful in the comments, and I will see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. Bye bye.